Democratic Party is the biggest opportunist organization in the United States. We don't live in a democracy. We have been told for our entire lives that we do, but that's just spin. The Democrats are a group that is tasked with one thing, which is tricking us into thinking that we do live in a democracy, tricking us into thinking that there is an alternative, that we're really choosing our path forward. That's just propaganda.
Today is Saturday, March 20th. The year is 2021. This is No Easy Answers, and I am your host, Jules Taylor. Today, like all days, I have no easy answers for you. Well, thank you for tuning in from wherever you happen to be listening. My name is Jules Taylor. This is No Easy Answers, and I am delighted to have you with us for today's episode. Joining us for our interview today is Comrade Gomer, an activist and online streamer who regularly teaches communist theory on his YouTube and Twitch page. We're going to be talking about baby leftists, or folks who have recently politically identified somewhere further left than liberal. It's a rather complicated question as to how to best guide someone through the stages of radical education. What should they be reading, and who should they be taking notes from, and who should they be organizing with? We're going to be talking about all of that and more, but first, some general housekeeping. No Easy Answers is a podcast about politics, philosophy, and the human condition. We are completely listener-supported, meaning that we entrust our listenership and folks just like you to help us keep things going. The single best way that you can help us continue is by subscribing to our Patreon page at patreon.com/noeasyanswers. Every little bit helps, and we literally could not do this without you. So thank you to all of our wonderful patrons who subsidize this show with a monthly donation. It's because of you that we continue to be listener-supported, and with your help, we will stay that way. Now, short of a monetary donation, there are several ways you can help the show. You can leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts, you can like and subscribe to the show, you can follow us on Twitter, you can share these episodes with your family and friends. Recommending the show to someone else is the highest form of compliments that we receive. So all of this helps us expand our reach and include more listeners in on the conversation, because these aren't one-sided conversations. You can find us on the No Easy Answers Reddit page, No Easy Answers Discord, and you can even chime in on the No Easy Answers Patreon page, as none of our content is behind a paywall. You can always send us a voice message or email your comments, concerns, criticisms, or vitriol to noeasyanswerspodcast@gmail.com. All right, so with all that out of the way, let's get to our interview with Gomer. But first, I've prepared a monologue to preface our conversation, so let's get started with that now. So at the time I started writing this introduction, we have just published an episode with occult deprogrammer Rick Alan Ross. And as I'm writing this, our next release will be our special episode done in collaboration with my friend Pearson at his podcast, Coffee with Comrades. So by the time you hear this, both of those episodes will have been out for a little while. But as for me in this moment, I'm just coming out of a bunch of research on cults, so my mind is still in that domain as I've sat down to write all this out. In our episode featuring cult deprogrammer Rick Alan Ross, I spoke to some of the self-help authors and spiritual advisors that make up a loosely allied group of what I've referred to as spiritualist capitalism. These people would make a claim to some form of metaphysical toolkit or some esoteric bag of tricks that if only you had, or if only you knew, your quality of life would increase, your interpersonal relationships would be enhanced, and professional success would be attained. They would have you believe that once you open yourself up to the possibility of abundance, or increase your openness to wealth and prosperity, or broaden your own sense of deservingness, or use the law of attraction, you can manifest forward into a life you've only imagined. Now, I wanted to take a few moments to lay out some of my criticisms of this thing I've been calling capitalist spiritualism, because I think there's a space where I can tie this into today's guest interview And also because I think so far all I've offered on this have been a few pithy remarks. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking about the copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad sitting on your bookshelf, or maybe you picked up a copy of Think and Grow Rich at some point, I'm not here to beat up on you and stomp on some of your beliefs. I mean, I want to tell you that I'm right there with you. I read that book by Napoleon Hill, and if you listen to our episode on destructive cults, you'd know that I took part in a large group awareness training that talked all about opening yourself up to the possibility of abundance and transformation. I read that book about love languages, and I think these book titles will ring a familiar bell with listeners. I want to say that I'm proud of us for trying to grow as individuals, right? I mean, most of us have picked up one of these books, and I would say a fair amount of us tried to read these books in good faith, meaning that we presume the works in question contain valuable things to take from them and that we, the reader, have the sincerity to seek to know. Maybe some of us who read some of those books or watched the film The Secret started doing funny things to try and manifest forward, like checking the mailbox with the intention of discovering a check for a large sum of money. Maybe every time you checked the mail for a while, you did so fully believing, like psyching yourself out as much as you could, into knowing that mailbox money is already there, just waiting for you. Maybe you created a vision board by cutting pictures out of a magazine. Maybe you hung that vision board at the foot of your bed so it would be the last thing you saw before you slept, and the first thing you saw when you woke up. Maybe you kept a stone in your pocket to remind you to be grateful. You know, on some level, because we are pitted against one another in competition for economic resources under capitalism, we are all looking for a leg up or any form of an advantage that would ensure our success and continued well-being. When we look to the ultra-rich with the curiosity to ask how they accumulated such obscene amounts of wealth, we're greeted with the standard mythos about forming a startup in their parents' garage. These stories would suggest the success and wealth of the ultra-rich is in their nature, ascribed into their personhood on account of their ingenuity and intelligence. If we take the mythos at face value, the lesson and moral to be inferred by them is that capitalism is set up in a way that any one of us, with enough ingenuity, smarts, and a good idea, can have similar successful results. Conversely, these stories dialectically imply that individuals in our society who have not met with similar success are not as innovative or driven towards success, and those shortcomings are also ascribed into their personhood. Many of us may conclude, after years of working menial jobs and living hand to mouth, the continuing struggle to earn a livable wage or never being able to accumulate an emergency savings fund is our fault. Society highlights successful people all around us, from Instagram influencers to celebrity endorsements, all the way up to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos jockeying for position as the richest person in America. We are subject to marketing campaigns and advertisements that serve to reinforce the perception that success is widespread and readily available. This is part of the reason why I've been mulling over why I have found myself to be so entirely resentful of this faction of loosely allied authors and public speakers I've been referring to as capitalist spiritualism. It's one thing to internalize the contradictions of capitalism, to blame yourself for items and elements clearly outside of your control. But the depravity that comes along with marketing a panacea around all this, that your situation could change for the better if only you had this metaphysical toolkit, or if you were imparted with an esoteric secret. Our society and the rich have a long history of blaming the poor for their poverty, but it is quite another thing altogether to develop a set of platitudes to sell to the poor as a means of alleviating their poverty. As I mentioned in the opening monologue for episode 23, it's not a revelation that grifters, bad actors, and swindlers are willing to leverage deeply rooted aspects of our humanity in service of their end goals. Some of them leverage spirituality, and this is everything and anything from a commitment to tithing to practicing polygamy in the Latter-day Saints Church. Now, being a non-spiritual person, after having endured some rough experiences in the Catholic and Baptist churches growing up, I can admit that there is a contempt that I have harbored for organized religion since I was a teenager. It was in my estimation that the Baptist church was leveraging the fear of death, the uncertainty of what happens after you die, and the notion of an unavoidable judgment thought to take place immediately after you die. I talked about that in episode 13. But these grifts, they are as old as time, and they occupy the surface level of a deeper point I'm attempting to drive home. Then you have the capitalist spiritualism group of self-help authors who leverage the fatigue of capitalism. They take the internalized blame for the lack of success or the lack of wealth, and they market the secrets of success to those who would be curious to ask how the ultra-rich attain their wealth. Now, some examples of this that come to mind are people like Andrew Carnegie, who wrote several books that claim to impart wisdom key to financial success. And you can see some of the language of the spiritual in its inchoate merging with the language of capital in the title of his essay, The Gospel of Wealth. Consider this quote in the opening paragraphs, quote, "The contrast between the palace of the millionaire and the cottage of the laborer with us today measures the change which has come with civilization. This change, however, is not to be deplored, but welcomed as highly beneficial. It is well, nay, essential for the progress of the race that the houses of some should be the houses for all that is highest and best in literature and the arts, and for the refinements of civilization, rather than that none should be so. Much better this great irregularity than universal squalor. For able men soon create capital. In the hands of those without the special talent required, capital soon takes wings." End quote. So you can see how Carnegie makes the case that income inequality and the social injustices of so few having so much is good for society, praising the able men creating capital while airing an exquisite contempt for the poor in his pithy reasoning for the poor languishing in poverty. Perhaps the best-selling and most popular work of capitalist spiritualism is Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, a book in which Hill claims to have been commissioned by Carnegie himself to gather all the secrets of the wealthy and successful and place them into a single-volume work. The truth is that Napoleon Hill is the most famous con man you've never heard of. Not only did Hill never meet with Andrew Carnegie, but he also claimed to have been an advisor to Woodrow Wilson, though White House records include no reference to him ever being there. He also had a short stint as the founder of a fraudulent university, the Automobile College of Washington, where he charged students to labor on the construction of cars to be sold to the Carter Motor Corporation for his financial benefit. Think and Grow Rich, like the Automobile College of Washington, was a scheme architected by Hill as part of a lifetime spent scamming people out of their hard-earned dollars. It was first published during the Great Depression, leveraging the desperation felt by the American public, but as recently as 2007, Businessweek magazine ranked it the 6th best-selling paperback business book 70 years after it was published. Now, one overtly political criticism of all this wealth manifesting nonsense is that it works in service of upholding the current system by way of obfuscating any meaningful critique and blame for ways the system has failed. I spoke a little bit about Marianne Williamson last time, as she's a character that is part of the New Age thought movement. I think listeners might recall who she is from the Democratic primaries, in which she said there was a, quote, dark psychic energy emanating from the Trump administration. She recently tweeted something I want to quote. Quote, "If enough of us will spend 2 minutes a day sending love from our heart to every other living being, there will be a miraculous shift all of us will feel." End quote. Now, this is exactly what I'm speaking of when I say the capitalist spiritualists are marketing platitudes which serve to obfuscate any meaningful systemic critique. They are muddying the waters of any clear attempt to raise the level of class consciousness, encouraging a form of thoughts and prayers above direct action. But still though, the more insidious part of all of this is that not only are these characters willing to leverage the spiritual parts of our humanity, not only are they willing to leverage your continued suffering under a failed system, but they also leverage the individual's desire to simply be a better person. The language used by capitalist spiritualism isn't limited to the language of the spiritual or wealth accumulation. These books, schemes, and coursework are marketed not only as a means to professional development, but they're also marketed as something to assist with personal growth, enhancing our interpersonal relationships, communicating more effectively, being a better partner, being kinder to yourself, increasing overall self-discipline and productivity, increasing one's ability to persevere during tumultuous times in our lives, and developing a sense of meaningfulness in our lived experiences. You end up with a dizzying array of characters giving you all sorts of questionable advice to improve one's condition, instead of understanding that one is a part of and embedded within a society which places constraints around possibilities. You get someone like Admiral William H. McRaven telling you to make your bed, or a person like Jordan Peterson telling you to clean your room, stand up straight, and embrace the characteristics of a hierarchical lobster existence, or someone like Eckhart Tolle advising you to be still and observe your thoughts and understand that suffering is not contained within a distressing event, but the thoughts which surround the event. Now, if you're a person who's read any of these works that I'm so sweepingly dismissing, and you got anything out of them, well, good for you. I mean, again, I want to say that I'm proud of us for taking the time and having the sincerity to work on our own personal development. If you feel any of those works gave you something you didn't have before, or enhanced your life in a way that simply was not possible before reading or attending a lecture or a large group awareness training, I think that's really a wonderful thing. I mean, I think in general, if one can take something enriching from something that is not intended to enrich you, that's a win for you and a loss for the other guy. And to be fair, I don't think each one of these authors or self-help gurus secretly have a nefarious intention from the start. There are those like Marianne Williamson who probably believe they are operating from a place of love and acting as a force for good. Though I might look at her and think she is under a cult-like spell, believing she is in possession of a metaphysical toolkit operating from a place of esotericism. Now, if you listen to that Coffee with Comrades episode, the host Pearson referenced a concept by German-born American political theorist Hannah Arendt. We spoke about the banality of evil, and that the explanations for human suffering are much more boring and commonplace than conspiracy theories would have us believe. And I bring that up to say, just as we need not jump to concocting wild fables around the origins of COVID-19, and that there are logical and naturalist explanations, rooted in science and germ theory, that are much more sound places to be informed from, we also need not rally the troops to channel love to every living creature for 2 minutes a day and accomplish something as vague as a miraculous shift when asking what we need to do to build a better world or answering the questions emerging from a fundamentally broken system. So if you're a person like me, simply trying to decipher the world around them, maybe politically you're a progressive or a democratic socialist and you're beginning to ask questions and look for answers, but you're wondering where you should look or who you should ask, then I think you're really going to gain something of value from my conversation with Comrade Gomer. I know what you're thinking. I mean, you're probably like, damn, Jules. I mean, you just took us through all of that. I mean, making fun of Eckhart Tolle, all that Andrew Carnegie history and Napoleon Hill. You just took us through all of that, just to come out the other side with a clear-eyed and resolute view of where we should look for answers. And now you're going to point us to a guy named Comrade Gomer. If you're laughing at that, then, I'm leveraging humor to get you to listen to this conversation. And humor is a part of Gomer's charm, but behind that cowboy hat and southern drawl is the voice of a person with a sober analysis of where to start with all of this. Now, I've left some links in the show notes for where you can find him online, so be sure to give him a follow on Twitter, and if you're left wanting more of Comrade Gomer after our conversation, be sure to head to his Twitch or YouTube channel where you can find him talking about leftist theory for beginners and tools for new revolutionaries. So Gomer, welcome to No Easy Answers.
How you doing?
Man, I'm good. How you doing, man?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to speak with you, hang out. We've only interacted a little bit online thus far. I think I went to your Twitch page is where I went to, and I saw that you were delivering some PowerPoint presentations, and
Yes.
And I thought that was really wonderful, man. And I don't know if there's a whole segment of folks like you actually engaging with people through PowerPoint presentations on Twitch to deliver this sort of message, but I thought it was notable enough to where I really just wanted to speak to you. You seem like you have this innate sort of natural urge to want to share this information, want to sort of enroll people in knowing some of the things that you know and seeing some of the things that you see. So I'm just really excited about it. And thank you for your time and being here and all of that, dude. So I guess before we get started, because I guess let me give you some background on where I'm coming from with this question, and I didn't preface this obviously in any of the questions, and if depending on how you answer or whatever, we'll edit it out if it's something that doesn't make any sense. But I just got what I was calling like cult land. Like yesterday, I just published this episode, which was an interview with a cult deprogrammer, and so that was a really cool episode. And so in my research, I've been spent in that world researching cults and shit, and so cut to when I published that episode. I don't know if you know of an organization called RevCom.
Oh yeah.
Right. So they have been up my ass for a while trying to like get me to join and stuff like that. And every now and then this nice older gentleman calls me and we talk about stuff, and it's really cool that like, I mean, I don't mind talking to him. It's great. So anyway, the reason I bring this up is because like I finally attended one of their meetings yesterday, and I have been in cult land this entire time doing research, and I started to get very suspicious of them right away because the first thing this woman said, and like just introducing new people to this organization, was that Bob Avakian is the greatest political thinker of our time, and that there is no one else delivering the strategy and analysis and an action plan for a revolution. And I immediately became suspect as like part of the. I mean, I was like, maybe there's a cult of personality thing going on here, and so. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about Bob Avakian or perhaps the folks over at Black Hammer. Like I think that there is something there, and if you would feel comfortable talking about that, then I will bring it up during conversation at some point or something, because I think it's maybe it's part of our responsibility if we're going to impart information to people who are just coming into this, that we should be sure to warn them about certain grifters, because communism is not something that is it can definitely be co-opted by capitalism and by grifters and swindlers and shit like that. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I'll tell you, I have not personally interacted with either RevCom or Black Hammer.
Okay.
I have seen some of the anti-Semitic stuff that Black Hammer puts out, and it can be kind of rough. Like calling Anne Frank a Becky, and
right.
Stuff like that. But the funny thing is, I think that when you talk about grifters have been a thing for since communism started, right? 1912, Lenin was talking about grifters, right? He calls them opportunists, but
right.
He's talking about the same thing. But what's really funny is the grifters go with the tide. They go with whatever is going on at the time. So in 1912, communism was in the air all across Europe. You know what I mean? There was a true feeling of revolution everywhere in every country, and so the grifters became communists. They all called themselves Marxists, right? They all said that they had the true mantle of Marxism, and yeah. So nowadays, when we have other things being more popular, like progressive politics being popular, then if you want to make money, you go that route. You say that you have the new socialism, you have compassionate capitalism, or you have social democracy, or whatever, any of those kind of things. That's the way to make money nowadays. There are some people who I think do it for they talk about doing it for clout or whatever. But I personally, I don't see RevCom or Black Hammer as grifters as such. I don't think they're making money, but I think you have it right on the first thing you said, as far as like it being more of a cult-like thing, because of the way that they spend a lot of time together. They're not really allowed to hang out in other organizations, and they have a very strict party line that you cannot step out of whatsoever. And they're also very, very like aggressive, right?
Right.
So those are all things that, like, I'm sure, researching Cultland, you saw like that kind of, like, all they have to add in is controlling sleep and food, and then moving to a compound, and it would be a full-on cult, right? That's literally all they're missing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think about, in being in cult land and learning some of the tenets of like what makes a cult, what distinguishes just a cult following from, say, a destructive cult. Um, there was part of it that was maybe made from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. I get in really researching this stuff, in that a cult doesn't have to, the end goal doesn't have to be sex trafficking or bodily harm. It can be a monetary thing, and it can be more widely held than we acknowledge. Like, maybe somebody's got a family member that has like a couple cases of, like, I don't know, some smoothie vegan drink they were supposed to sell as part of a multi-level marketing scheme, that sort of thing. It
Mhm.
happens all the time in society. Um, so I guess part of what making it into 3 dimensions was that it can be just a monetary grift. And so I bring up Black Hammer. Obviously, there's like a cult of personality thing going on there, but I also became extremely suspect of the characters and mission when they started building for this Hammer City thing, which they're just trying to build their own actual city, and they're calling it Hammer City, and that's what they're collecting funds with the mission objective of. And
Really? Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
And they want to model this stuff off of, ironically enough, there's a documentary. I might have this wrong, but then again, it might be correct. It was called Wild Wild Country, or something about like this yoga guru person that moves to, and takes over like a town and tries to build their own city here in the States. And I don't know the exact details of that, but I know they took some inspiration from that, which is, taking inspiration from the way a cult did things and thinking you can kind of reinvent that is problematic on its own. So, and I didn't know if you were familiar with any of that stuff with Black Hammer at all.
I
Um,
didn't know that. And I'll tell you, so one thing that I do think is important, like I could put you in contact with uh, some of my African American comrades who are disciplined Marxists, and
sure.
I think especially when we're criticizing Black Hammer, it's important for it to come from a
Oh
Black
yeah,
voice. You know what I mean?
sure. Yeah, it's dangerous to even like. I totally hear you on that. Yes.
But but yeah, fundamentally, I get you, and it's one really funny thing is just bringing it back to what I do. Like I do a lot of mutual aid work, and over the course of the pandemic, this is not me tooting my own horn. I'm just telling you, like I've given away a few $1,000s to food drives and to my own things in the community, helping to feed and get hygiene supplies for the unhoused folks where I live. Um, just because it's been terrible and we have to depend on each other, right? That like mutual aid in times of need literally means just helping keep your city alive, right? It looks
Yeah.
kind of like charity, but really in times of need it's a survival program, right? But I get called a grifter every single day. So
Mm.
when I because just because I have a Twitch, and my medium is like I was a teacher before, and I consider this to be like a classroom, right? So
I can
I make
tell. That's really cool.
I make these PowerPoint presentations much like I used to when I was teaching in the classroom, and that's the
Yeah.
point, right? Is to give people an introduction to some of these texts, much like this if this were a Marxism 101 type class, right? And and yeah, but people, like literally every enemy I have and every person who's like one of those like self-promoting types. Because there are quite a few self-promoting types on Twitter, and they collect donations and they live off of those donations, which is whatever. I think if you're doing good work in the community, it's fine to live off of donations, especially if you're mostly living in a like off of in a very poverty stricken kind of way. Like if you're like a monk, then whatever, you live off donations. But I just have to say that like um it's the number one insult right now. And I think that it's extremely detrimental because it attacks in particular people who are trying to just educate in the community, right? Anybody
Sure.
who is anybody who's asking for donations, period, for small local mutual aid efforts will get called a grifter at least once.
Mm.
But especially anybody who's creating any media, any kind of wide, like using the internet to teach. I honestly do feel in many ways like this is it's a psyop. You know what I mean? Like it's because it's an easy one by the FBI to just make some sock puppet accounts and go online and just spam that every single person who's doing any kind of communist education is a grifter. It's such an easy thing to do, right? You can automate it.
Yeah, it's rough, man. I mean, it goes back to something that when you're throwing a rope in the ocean and you're drowning, you don't question where the rope is leading you, and so the underlying conditions that have increased the overall suffering and desperation that are being felt by all of us at this point um, have, to a certain degree, only made us more susceptible and vulnerable to some of these red herring lifelines that may be thrown out,
Mhm.
and so
Okay.
I, in sort of bringing it back to society and where we are right now, um, man, I love what you do because there's something to learn from your PowerPoint presentations, whether you're a seasoned old salty dog that's read all the shit, or whether you're just starting out. And so I kind of struggle with, every now and then you get a person who is just getting into being radicalized, or you could see some of the underlying questions emerging that they're noticing. And I hesitate with like where to point them. I mean, I don't want to throw like the entire copy of like Capital at them, because I
If you
mean,
kill them,
that's
it's so heavy.
kill them with it, yeah, man. So I mean, that's a blunt object. It's traumatic. Um, so I wonder what your take is on reading theory. And I mean, in a matter of like, it's important to develop a robust political outlook, and so I wonder if there's any political theory that you might recommend, specifically to folks who are just, baby leftists, I guess we could call them.
Absolutely. So I think a couple of things are necessary. You read the fundamentals, like you read Principles of Communism first, because it's very simple. I read it in an evening once when I just wanted to crank through it for a class the next day. Most people it takes a couple days and it's no big deal. You have to look up a few words, no problem. I recommend to people a lot of times after that to read State and Revolution, because
Mm,
it's a little bit more challenging, but not much. And we are working on a simple English translation of it, some comrades and I.
wonderful.
But the ideas in there are the ones that let you know that all the things that we have been told is what we should be working on, as far as the way that we've been propagandized as progressives, right? Are false and are from the same establishment that we are allegedly trying to fight against, right? So
Right.
there's quite a bit of propaganda out there that makes us think that it's from people like us, but it is not. And State and Revolution says it's been the same shit for 100 years. For over 100 years, they've been trying to throw this shit out there. That opportunistic stuff that takes revolutionary energy, throws it away, reroutes it into shit that don't work, right? So State and Revolution is important just for that. It's for finding a way out, finding a new way of doing things, but also for recognizing that the vote your way to freedom line does not work.
That's right.
Um, After that, I always recommend someone get away from the old white guys. Just for a bit, you can always go back to them. They got plenty of good things to say. But but read something from one of the Black Panthers. So Huey P.
Hmm.
Newton
Right.
is like the Huey P. Newton Reader is really good. Asada Shakur's biography is really good. Angela Davis's Women Racing Class is good. But the one that I recommend the most to people, especially like people get jazzed. A lot of people get jazzed after they read State and Revolution. So I
Oh yeah.
say, read Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. Blood in My Eye by George Jackson is the book that has probably influenced me the most in my life. Every page is fire. He was literally like he was writing like he was on his deathbed, because he was, right? He was killed months after the book was released,
Mm-hmm.
like murdered. He was murdered in prison, right? So the man literally is like a Jean Valjean story, right? He stole like some bullshit from a convenience store. Maybe he actually may have been framed for it, and then he spent the next 10 years in prison. And it's literally a crime that a white person would get probation for, right? So he steals some from a convenience store, gets 10 years in prison. He's assaulted constantly in prison. And the reason is because he's a communist, right? Communists in prison, they're just treated differently. If the prison guards find out that you are a revolutionary, your life is made significantly harder. So every word on that page is from his personal experience, and he has such a clear vision and a clear understanding of the way that the world works, and those combined make for some very powerful writing.
Man, so there's so much there that I want to talk to you about, right? So the whole state and revolution thing, man. I just want to say about Lenin is when you really consider that Lenin is arguably the most important political thinker of the 20th century, and you can make yourself, you can go through graduate school, maybe in political science, and never really hear the guy mentioned, which is a travesty and fucked up. And but Lenin's also, I know, first time you read, State and Revolution, it's like you find yourself standing on top of your bed, like proselytizing, because you're just like, wow, this is, and it gets you so amped up. It's awesome. And the whole, blood in my eye thing, man. I'm so happy that you immediately, in what you would recommend, turn towards like the Black radical tradition, because I think, in stuff that I've read out of there, I has really taken the concept of communism into something that, like, I don't really want anyone's particular brand of communism if it's not like Black Marxism, if it's not about stuff like how Europe underdeveloped Africa, if it's not about the work of Cedric Robinson or Franz Fanon, or and there's even value in shit that like Eldridge Cleaver, the guy ended up in later in life campaigning for Reagan and all sorts of questionable stuff there. But if you read Soul on Ice, man, I mean, it's poetry. And if you read something like maybe the work of like Kevin Rashid Johnson, man, that guy wrote from prison as well. So these are both works that were written in prison, and there's a real, like, there's like a visceral sort of feeling that you get out of those texts, that this is coming from someone that is incarcerated, that has seen, the dead ends of desperation. And so, yeah, I just want to say that I'm really happy that you recommend that sort of stuff, brother. And the other thing, watch out, all you fuckers with sickle and hammer tattoos, because like if you go to prison with a sickle and hammer tattoo, and I'm speaking as a person with a sickle and hammer tattoo as well, so that's one thing that I've thought about as well. But yeah, anyway, so I fucking A, brother. You talked a little bit about opportunism and opportunists, and how propaganda, the same messaging that comes out of the establishment they're supposed to be fighting against. Like, why would you take their advice? Why would you believe the words they say? Why would you not at least hold that stuff within question, right? I mean, I think the United States is just swimming in like anti-communist propaganda. Like we're drowning in it. And so being a communist in public is arguably like not socially accepted, because all it takes is like one person getting in your face about Stalin killing a bajillion people for somebody to understand that anti-communism is alive and well in this country. And I say that, and we've had Grover Furr on the show before, which is a person that I would encourage folks to check out when they get to that point in their studies and they're learning about the USSR, and they get these sort of things thrown back at them about how Stalin killed a bajillion people or what have you. So I guess, how do you go about debunking some of these myths? And assure baby leftists that like the path they're pushing is not something as like Horseshoe would suggest, equivalent to fascism?
That's a great question. Talking about Grover Furr, I oftentimes recommend people who are in particular anti-Stalin or anti-USSR to read his stuff, just as an alternative point of view, even if you don't believe everything he says. You know what I mean? There's a great value in just hearing something that's not State Department propaganda. Because really everything that we're fed is State Department propaganda about those times, which is why, generally speaking, I don't talk about the USSR, I don't talk about China, or any of the other, AES countries, simply because the amount of State Department propaganda that I have to wade through to get to reach somebody sometimes when talking about that stuff is just, I'm better off talking about other things. You know what I mean? So
right.
What I tell people is, regardless of how you feel about those countries, we can talk about that later on. But what do you think about liberating people now? What do you think about people dying in the street from homelessness because they got put out by their landlord during a pandemic? What do you think about people dying from not having insulin that used to cost $5 a bottle and now costs $500, right? So I bring it back to things like this because those are things that we can all understand. And when I tell them, okay, you're on the same page with the problem. Now let's talk about the solution. Do you think we can vote our way to freedom? Right. And
Right.
if people say no, then I say, great, you're a communist.
That's awesome, man.
If they say yes, if they say maybe, then what I talk about is the nature, like just the very fundamental nature of capital. So often when people talk about communism or socialism in general, right, especially opportunists, they get very deep in the weeds of economic theory, and they'll use a lot of confusing words. They'll really stretch their college vocabulary out because they're trying to glamour you. They're trying to impress you, right? But the truth is, even the dumbest worker, this is something that straight Karl Marx said, right? He said meanest, I believe, but meanest back in the day meant dumb. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's like, the most regular ass dude who works understands communism because they have felt the exploitation from their boss, right? They've suffered under capitalism. So they understand the fundamentals. So what I always do is I try to just get them back to that core understanding that they that they have already inside of them. As far as like avoiding reactionaries and a lot of people slipping into the other side of things, right? Being convinced by the reactionaries, as you mentioned, that's a difficult thing because a lot of times reactionaries use a lot of this socialist rhetoric just like the opportunists do. In fact, one could say that every single truly fascist movement has used socialist language and co-opted it for its own ends, right?
Right.
So it says, hey, look at all these problems, but you know what the real problem is? Non-white people, right? They'll slip in, slip in the racism, right? They'll slip in the whatever bigotry it is that drives their fascist movement. So a lot of times what I do when I'm talking to people, when I'm talking to regular people, is I make very clear who the true enemy is and diagnose the problem and talk about the solution in the most simple terms, because anything over that, it gets confusing and it starts to be easier to refute using the State Department propaganda that has been put into our heads.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent way to think about it. Definitely. And going back to the meanest worker or what have you, man. I just want to add to that something that is kind of, when I read it, I didn't really know how to take it, but then once I started using it as somewhat of a mantra, I found that it's really been helpful. And I mean, somebody online said, you aren't a true communist unless you understand that people aren't dumb and you aren't smart. And
fair enough.
and so that hit me, man, and I reacted internally a little strongly to it. It was like, oh, hey, and it was like, why did that impact me? And the more that's marinated, the more that's really steered me down the right way at times. Whenever I, come up in terms of like, can people handle this? I mean, and we know about Ho Chi Minh teaching illiterate Vietnamese rice farmers Marxism, and so I think about the people aren't dumb and you aren't smart thing. And while I think it's also like important to place things, in the simplest terms, I also want to maintain, when I have those conversations, like a faith that the person I'm talking to can handle these things. As much as I assume that they're listening in good faith, or that they have the sincerity of thought to receive the information. I also want to have and entrust them with like the faith to handle these points, criticisms, and I also think that like it's not so much that we're trying to make the unconscious conscious; it's that we're trying to make the unconscious notice their unconsciousness. And so that's where I come from in thinking of how should I impart this knowledge. But I really love your response, man. And another thing here, I guess, leftists, I mean, I know leftists in my life, they came by way of liberalism. It was a bunch of liberals that maybe became a rad lib for a second and then started a deeper line of questioning. And maybe they got their current political views by way of Bernie and the DSA, or perhaps they just kind of felt abandoned by the Democratic Party. And I'm sure you probably get asked this a lot, but can you briefly sort of speak to some of the ways that the Democratic Party and neoliberalism has failed the American worker?
Sure, absolutely. So the Democratic Party is the biggest opportunist organization in the United States. So they literally have rigged every primary, right? Since I've been alive, certainly, but they've rigged a couple of very big ones since I've been alive. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a dictatorship. And when I say that, some people will say, "Oh, you mean like, we don't really live in a democracy, but our votes still kind of count." And what I'm saying is, no, we don't live in anything resembling a democracy. We have been told for our entire lives that we do, but that's just spin. That's just propaganda, right? And what the Democrats are a group that is tasked with one thing, which is tricking us into thinking that we do live in a democracy, tricking us into thinking that there is an alternative, that we're really choosing our path forward. They suck up revolutionary energy. They're a catch and kill group for revolutionary movements. They are no different from the Republicans in that they are simply they're the running dogs for capitalists, and even the ones that are the most quote unquote progressive, the ones who we care about, the ones who we wish were actually president, looking at people like Bernie Sanders, right? Those are oftentimes the most dangerous, because what they'll do is they'll take someone who may be a true believer. Either Bernie Sanders is a great actor, like an Oscar-worthy actor, or he's a true believer, right? So, and it could be either one. I ain't saying necessarily either way. But let's say he is a true believer. Let's just go with that. They put him up. They say, "Look, you have a chance. This is the person that you want. He may not be exactly like who you are, like, hey, you socialists and communists and all you left-wing folk. This guy may not be exactly like who you are and what you want, but ain't he better than all these other folks?" And what you do is you work for him. I mean, I volunteered many hours for Bernie Sanders. I donated hundreds of dollars to the campaign. And the reason is I want people to have health care. I knew it was dumb. I knew I was being tricked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Both times I knew I was being tricked.
Yeah.
But I love people. You understand? Like the core of every communist belief is a love for the people, right?
Yeah.
So I've had family members die from not getting their medication. So for me, it drives me. It drives me to want to help, even to interact with a system that I know is fundamentally corrupt. But in the end, it served to radicalize me even more. Like, I was already a communist. Well, it made me, I guess, a double communist. Because you see it happen where they get a judge to say that they can rig the primaries if they want to. Like, they literally got a judge to say that, right? Mm-hmm. They stuff the ballot box in a statistically provable way. They don't even hide it, right? They like when it looked like old Pete Buttigieg had won in his area, and then they did just the most basic statistical analysis of the exit polls versus what it said that he had gotten, and it was just wildly off and always swinging against Bernie and always swinging for him, right? And the point of running Bernie and like having a little bit of danger to capital there potentially maybe is that whenever they snatch the rug out from under us, whenever inevitably the progressive person, the quote unquote socialist person does not win, they can say, "Oh, if y'all had just tried a little bit harder, if y'all had just engaged with the system a little bit more, right? If you had campaigned, if you had knocked more doors, if you had donated more to the party, maybe your guy could have won. Maybe your guy would have had a chance, but y'all are just too lazy. You lazy socialists just can't get out the vote, right?" And so what happens is you get a lot of people who get caught in this loop. Not people like us, not communists, but I'm talking about these progressives who are afraid of revolution. They get trapped in this loop of giving more and more time, more and more energy, more and more money, and they burn out, right? The point of this is to burn out these true believers until they have wasted all of their time and energy and they can't do anything anymore. They can't agitate the people in a meaningful way. So that's why I tell people, I don't vote. I didn't vote. I did I did some down ballot voting because sometimes your local person can do a little bit,
Sure.
not much,
Right.
not much.
Right.
Like people who campaign and say like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the city level. It's like, no. They'll find ways to route your revolutionary energy into the trash can too. But nonetheless, I tell people now, like, don't worry about that. Don't campaign, don't vote, because it is always going to be rerouted into the garbage can. And they are going, like, it hurts you. It hurts the energy of the movement. People say we can do both. We can't. I have like 10 hours a week that I can give to communism, right? I have a regular job. I cannot give anymore. I have to sleep. I have to eat. I have to hang out with my partner.
Right.
So whenever people say we can do both, what they're really saying is, don't do your project, keep doing this project, and in the end, don't do anything meaningful. We have to focus on dual power. If we continue to focus on electoralism and let the Democrats control us in the way that they want, then we are always going to get what we've always got. We've gotten decades and decades of entryism into the Democratic Party, and we have nothing to show for it. Absolutely nothing to show for it.
Maybe you can be the sort of social democrat cult deprogrammer, because that's what I mean. I don't know, man. Maybe everything is popping up as a cult to me lately, man, and the way we started this conversation, because like shit, man, it sounds like people are in a daze, like they are what's the word, obsequious or subservient to the Democratic Party that leverages their time, energy, finances, and then makes empty promises and spins when the next sort of political legislation doomsday is coming down, like, oh, we didn't get the minimum wage this time, and we're going to put it off.
Yeah.
And here's how we justify that. I mean, I don't know, it sounds like a fucking cult to me, man. But but all right, so, and I apologize, man, I know the show, like I want to get like rip roaring into like the weeds on certain things with you, but I also want to, I'm going to try and focus and stay on task with like, how do we help folks that are just coming into these studies, that are just coming into these sharper criticisms of capitalism? I mean, how do we guide them, and not necessarily like steward them, man, but like definitely like encourage them in a proper way? And so I wonder, man, many of these people, like, they start plotting themselves on these sort of Cartesian graphs, and they're like, hey, I'm an anarcho-syndicalist, or I'm an anarcho, I'm a communist, but I got some anarchist tendencies, and they take on this philosophical compatibilist notion between like, oh, why can't anarchists and communists just, left unification? And it's like, Jesus Christ, man, there are so many different sectors going, they're just, they're so siloed off in a way too. So I wonder, man, like, there are certain political lines that I think you have to follow as a communist. Like, you have to follow anti-capitalism, anti-colonialism, and anti-fascism, right? So maybe could you speak to the importance of anti-imperialism in regards to forming a fully developed worldview? Because I think that if you're just coming into this, you're like, oh yeah, capitalism sucks. Okay. Oh yeah, we don't like fascists, right? Oh yeah, we don't like colonialism. But anti-imperialism to them may not be as clear.
Sure, that's a very interesting question. Let me speak to the first thing you said first, and I'll get to that. So, I do think that there is a tendency on the left to do this very interesting thing of upholding eclecticism, right? The idea of just picking and choosing different ideologies and slamming together something and calling it your very own individual brand of ideology. Like, this is Gomerism, right? And that is that's an American individualist tendency that's programmed into us. And the interesting thing is, you always hear from those same people also calls for left unity, everybody working in the same groups all the time. And the problem is that you can't have any real coherence to a group if you have 1,000 different ideologies, and the only thing you agree on is anti-capitalism, right? So I personally say that people should form small cadres, and they should have the cadre should have a few dedicated political lines. It doesn't have to get super into detail. It doesn't have to get like we are Maoists and we don't fuck with Marxist Leninists or whatever, right? So I think that you can be a little bit better than that. But I do think that you have to say, even if we will organize with other groups, like even if we as communists will organize with the with the anarchist groups in our city to come together on things that we agree with. We don't have to always all say that we are all in one group and we're all the same, because in a lot of times you get infighting over dumb shit that really shouldn't be an issue, things that were solved in the first international. And then you and then you also get the problem of having a hard time picking messaging, and how do you teach the people right now. Educating the people is the number one thing that I think we all need to be worrying about. We need to be doing praxis. We need to be helping out in our neighborhoods, feeding people, fighting back against the cops, tenants unions, all kinds of things are very important to do, right? But primarily, I do think that the whole of the United States is in this state of programming that is so advanced that it's hard to do any kind of praxis with regular folks until you have started to attack that programming. Now, getting to the second part of your question about imperialism, there is no communist movement without an anti-imperialist core to that communist movement. Anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism are the core, because that is the primary contradiction, as they say. Contradiction is one of them words that, like, it's kind of a highfalutin word. So I always break it down for people when I say it, which is that contradiction is more than just a battle. It's more than just having two sides. A flame is in contradiction with a candle. Okay. The reason that Marx used this word contradiction is to show that there are these two sides, but it's two sides that affect each other and that define each other in many ways. You can't have the flame without the candle, right? And a candle without a flame really isn't a candle anymore either, right? So the working class is defined in many ways by the owning class. If there was no owning class, if there was no rich people, then our society would look totally different, right? We wouldn't be exploited workers if there wasn't anybody doing the exploiting. So in destroying the rich, we also destroy being the working class and become something different entirely. So the primary contradiction, looking at it that way, is in like, what's the real battle? What are the real two sides? What are the forces that are controlling the world right now and that communists need to focus on? And imperialism is that primary contradiction. And the reason is we have colonized nations living in the United States, right? We can consider the indigenous nation, the Black nation, all the non-white groups in the United States really are colonized peoples living in a white supremacist society. And so when you start looking at it that way, things look a lot different. You start understanding that, like, the way they are treated is very much like a colonized people facing their oppressors. So everything that Fanon writes about becomes very, very appropriate to look into. But also, when we look abroad, when we look at how the U.S. forcibly opens markets in all countries, right? Whenever we go to a new country, what you can see is an attack that destroys the infrastructure of the country, and then you can look at the they track these statistics, right? So you can look at the manufacturing as a percentage of the economy in the country, and it will go down every single time, and it goes down drastically. I'm talking about like slashed, right? Now what that shows, and I know this is kind of getting deep, but it's important. What it shows is that we are literally going into a country, killing people, breaking up its infrastructure, destroying its buildings and its factories, and buying up its raw resources. We force the people to sell us their raw resources, and then we sell them back finished products. And the difference between the finished products and the raw resources, right? That's the money that we're stealing from the people, right? So that's how America gets rich and supports its its dying capitalism, its dying imperial core, while the rest of the world suffers. So if we consider ourselves to be human beings first and not Americans first, then that's terrible. But also we have to know, like, when we look around, that like our lifestyles are subsidized on the blood and tears of other people, and it will never stop. The forever war thing that we have going on is fundamental to our economy. It's fundamental to our way of life. So peace movements don't work. we can't tell the government, hey, please stop doing this, because this is how capitalism continues. If it stopped doing this, America would eat itself out of hunger, right? So peace movements are a total non-starter. It will take a revolution to stop all of the forcible revolutions, the forcible capitalist revolutions that we do overseas constantly, right? So if people listen to this may think, like, how is that the primary contradiction for me? Like, that doesn't necessarily really affect my life, right? I'm just a regular person trying to get by. Whatever the US military is doing is not a thing.
Right.
The answer is every single socialist movement, even the proto-socialist movements of like the early to mid 1800s, they have all failed because they have not addressed this primary contradiction, right? The racism and sexism inherent in the abolition movement, and then the racism inherent in the women's suffrage movement is what killed them for so long, right? It wasn't until they stopped being so terrible all the time that they were able to get some things going. And you can read, like, if you read Angela Davis's Women, Race, and Class, she spells it out very clearly about this, right? So the American socialist projects have failed because they haven't addressed this. The proto-socialists before the Civil War were not able to address slavery in any meaningful way. So of course they failed, right? The communists in the United States were not able, again, to address the treatment of non-white people in the United States, and so they failed, right? Because the non-white people saw how quickly these white folks were willing to give up on them just so that they could have their own version of quote-unquote socialism. So of course it sapped them of all revolutionary energy. They're like, y'all are just the same as the other colonizers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if we don't care about these things, if we don't look at it as a whole problem of how America stays alive through exploitation of us as well as other people all over the world, right? Then we don't get the whole picture, and our movement will be riddled with racism and other kinds of bigotry that totally kill it and sap it of all energy.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, when there's some kind of complex thoughts I have around imperialism, in that when I first realized that, like, anti-imperialism has to be at the core of your outset and practice and worldview, and how that was a much more like center stone, or more of the center cog in the outreaching wheel, so to say, it occurred to me that, like, American police forces being militarized is simply the logical extension of years of imperialism. That the militarism and the weapons manufacturing of the United States was actually just returning to our shores, because we have exported this, just like we have exported capitalism in a lot of ways, right? We've exported high finance, and that goes back to the Lenin book, what is it? Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. But this militarism has nowhere else to go, in a way, and it kind of just spills back onto our shore in the form of police forces, right? And then I also started to think about how kind of this, like, Robert Talbot book called War of the Flea, and about how the anti-imperialist movements of home sap the political capital of our governments to continue their imperialist projects. So if you look at perhaps Vietnam and the way that went, at least the anti-war movement really sapped and tried to deprive the U.S. government of the political capital it needed in order to continue this affront overseas. And that's part of why the war collapsed and why the United States withdrew, and how Vietnam won its independence. And I also think that part of the reason why worker solidarity has not reached a point to where we've risen up and overthrown these motherfuckers for the constant oppression and indignities that we have, I think it's because Americans have a vested interest in the wealth extraction that happens in other countries, and we call it the third world. We have this Hollywood film industry that that shows the swarthy hordes being surrounding the covered wagon, that shows Rambo going back to Vietnam and murdering a bunch of people there. It shows, I mean, it's an entire abstract mechanism for dehumanization and allowing whiteness to posture above and oppress people all over the globe. So anti-imperialism is something that is fed to us, or imperialism or support for the imperial project is fed to us through propaganda. and all sorts of like, state apparatuses that way, So yeah, all of that, what you said about anti-imperialism, the more you think about it, the more I think it grows into this fully fleshed out, like, holy shit, why did we not focus on this? And so for me, it fundamentally changed a lot of my outlooks when I realized that like anti-imperialism has to be at the core of everything we do. So let's talk about guns, brother. I don't know if you, I am, I don't own any guns, man. But I grew up in Texas, and I mean, I live in New York now. Laws are a little different now, but when my grandfather passed, I think I inherited. Yeah, I see Gomer's holding up a gun, holding up a Nerf gun. It's a home defense system there. Yeah. So when my grandfather passed, man, I think I inherited somewhere around like a dozen long rifles and another like half a dozen to 10 or so pistols and shit. And it's like it's all in Texas. And I like, how the fuck am I going to bring that to New York State? You know. But I also think, when I think of guns and stuff, like I'm not your typical person that wants to like maybe stash it like in a closet somewhere with the key with things removed. I mean, I'm kind of like, let's get some weapons and bury them in a bag in the backyard, sort of thing, because, I don't want to use that in a home robbery. I don't want to use that. I want to use that if the shit really hits the fan. And the longer we live in this decaying, capitalist empire, the more that those thoughts turn a little more serious at times. So can you speak to a little bit, I guess, why we are opposed to liberal suggestions of gun control and how ultimately any restrictions on the Second Amendment would ultimately be harmful to marginalized communities?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you first, let me start with this. I have a website, radicalreparations.com, where I talk about how white folks should specifically try to help arm legally their Black comrades.
Mm.
The thing is, Black folks all non-white folks, but particularly Black and Latino people in this country are specifically barred from having weapons through incarceration, right? Through felony charges that take away their voting rights and take away their right to own a firearm, and that's purposeful, right? It's not surprising. It shouldn't be surprising that the two things that are the most immediate and legal way of standing up against oppression are the things that are the first taken away by over-policing, and the over-policing is very studiously done in non-white communities.
Mm.
Now, when you're talking about why the proletariat has to be armed, it's very simple. Before a revolution, right, arming the proletariat means getting ready for the revolution. But after the revolution, we still have to have defenses against tyrannical governments, right? So all of the things that the far right people talk about, like a well-armed populace is the best defense against tyranny and all that, right? I mean, they're not totally wrong in a lot of ways. So the reason that Marx and Lenin talk so much about how we have to keep the proletariat armed is because we say, hey, we choose our leaders, right? We need leaders who are immediately recallable, is something that they say, right? And then sometimes the leader doesn't want to get recalled. Sometimes somebody gets into power because they sought out power and they don't want to go home. They want to stay there. The minute that the police steps in to protect them and the regular people can't fight back against it, you have reinvented a class system, right? Mm-hmm. So especially when we talk about non-white folks, right? The organization of production is fundamentally racist. The way that jobs are set up, the way that the government is set up, the way that logistics and even as far as communication systems and media is set up is all fundamentally racist, right? So non-white folks have the deck stacked against them culturally, organizationally, and governmentally, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to say that if the final line of defense is the personal firearm, right? If eventually it comes down to it, they have to be armed, right? our most revolutionary segment of the population should be armed. White folks should concentrate on that if they want to have a revolution. But nonetheless, even if we're not worried about that, even if we're literally just talking about right and wrong and self-defense for the marginalized, right? If we all consider ourselves to be one human race, right? Then what we should do is we should look at the places where we have not fixed it yet. We should look at the places where society still has this baked-in racism that can't be changed overnight, and say, well, the non-white folks still need to defend themselves against this, right? So even if I have tried to attack my whiteness and consider myself to be just one of a member of the human race, when I still see my non-white comrades being treated badly, that should enrage me even more. Yeah. It should make me want to help them any way that I can, which includes not stepping in the way, right? But also fighting along their side as they defend themselves. So yeah, that's why I think there's a lot of different things there, but fundamentally, I wouldn't say that I believe in zero gun control. Like, I do think that there have been times in my life where it really would not have been great for me to own a firearm, you know. Sure. And I think that for the truly people who have really intense mental health issues, where maybe they can even recognize themselves that they're not it's not safe for them to own a gun, right? I think that makes sense. But anything besides that, right? If you're talking about quote unquote felonies that are for owning a little bit of weed, or if you talk about like just the financial barriers to entry that is the majority of gun control laws, then yeah, we can say that they're racist. We can say they're classist, but we can fundamentally say that they're racist, and that we have to attack that any way we can.
Excellent. Yeah, part of it for me comes down to like, we just got done talking a little bit about militant police, and it's like, how the fuck are you gonna support disarming people and leaving them with militarized police, man, that can already kill you with impunity? I mean, it's like fuck. I mean, like, I know we believe in a sort of in a dictatorship of the proletariat, so we're in a sense, to that degree, perhaps statist, but like, I am not in support of the state to the point where we could be left without weapons and allow them to have all of them. I mean, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun, and we see how, I don't know if you, there's a book by Charles E. Cobb Jr. called This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed. And he talks about how, man, like, black people could not vote and were not necessarily like part of the improvement in their conditions in this country, as little as it has improved, has come from their experience with firearms and fighting in the military. And every time we'd have a war, they'd come back, and you can't expect people to fight for freedom overseas and yet submit to servitude once they return. And so it goes back to people like Medgar Evers, so this process, Charles E. Cobb Jr. really does a great job of historically detailing how firearms have fundamentally increased I guess it's brought black folks into the democratic process in this country, so far as it is effective, the democratic process that is in this country. So yeah, man. During my process of radicalization, I read some Marx and Lenin, and that's just me, because I fucking read things, and I that's just, if you're not a reader, that's okay. There's plenty of other. That's why when I tune into shit like you, man, I'm like, dude, this is great. Like, you talking about history, and I think you did like a bit of the history of the CIA recently, I caught. And so it was really wonderful. Okay. All right, so go ahead. Yeah.
While you're pausing real quick, I just wanted to ask, are you, at some point, are we going to do like an intro thing, or are you just going to record that separately and then we'll bring it in?
I was just going to throw it in there, man. Intros to me, I've kind of gotten out of the habit of doing them, and I just sort of have some sort of monologue up front and then kind of transition into the interview, but I definitely should, like, I guess I didn't even give you a chance to introduce yourself as well.
No. If you don't, dude, that's fine. If that's not what you do, then that's fine. In fact, I respect that. I just wanted to make sure that I knew what the program was and we didn't miss anything. I've done a few podcasts, and everybody's got their own way of doing it. So yeah. I respect the just jumping in model, because I think actually a lot of the people that I listen to pretty religiously, like Rev Left.
Yeah.
And those, like, sometimes they do, it's funny, sometimes they do a little intro, and sometimes they just, like, he'll have, like you say, he'll have a monologue and they'll just be interviewing. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, I didn't have anything especially planned. I just sort of, was excited to talk to you and came in and got into it right away. And I had that on my mind about the whole RevCom and Black Hammer thing. When I was like having a cigarette outside before I came in, I was like, I wonder if Gomer would talk about that, because there is a sort of responsibility to shepherd folks in a way that doesn't get them as, committing their revolutionary energy or finances or what have you to someone that's not planning on fucking following through with any revolutionary action. Like, part of my deal with, because I think I told you I was on a RevCom like Zoom conference yesterday, because they finally got me to attend one of their meetings and they were talking and shit. And one of the things when they're talking, their whole thing is revolution, nothing less. And okay, that's great. I'm on board with that, man. However, don't sit here and tell me that you are actively planning towards a revolution to overthrow something like this is seditious talk that you're not doing on any encrypted app, that you're not doing. You're being very cavalier about this, public facing, out in the open. And I told them, I was like, my instinct here is to ask you this, and I tried to do it in the most non-offensive way possible. But I was like, are you a multi-level marketing scheme dressed up as activists? Because the only reason a public-facing company would have such openly public, seditious sort of, rhetoric would be if they weren't planning on fucking following through with anything anyway. So
rock and roll, man. That's telling it to him.
Because I was like, hey, this is an intro shit, and like, for my own enrichment, I'm not sitting here trying to have a discussion about Marx and shit that's really, kind of 101 stuff. Like, our conversation is different because I care about people enrolling in studying radical theory and engaging in radical practice. Like, is something that I'm deeply committed to, that I can feel like gives me goosebumps, man. Mm-hmm. Like, so when I get my spidey senses going about bad actors or something, or people that are doing things in bad faith, I mean, what are they going to do? They're just on a conference call. It's like, okay, yeah, I will tell you how I feel. Yeah, man. So I guess maybe we can round things out a little bit, brother. And I will ask you, and I want to know a little bit more about you too, because my favorite type of leftists are like Southern leftists that defy this fucking stereotype of because I think there's a real like pragmatism and a real like down home wisdom, man, to Southern leftists that I don't know, it personally gets me excited, man. Like, somebody sitting there with a shotgun and an old copy of State and Revolution or something, it is like, hell yeah, that's like some of my favorite shit. So in the spirit of like acknowledging the sort of Southern communist brand of what you do, man, maybe we can round things out a little bit by talking about like class reductionism, in that Marx says that all of history is class war, and he distills the peoples of history into haves and have-nots. And so maybe you can speak to the shared interest of the working class as a whole, and how these interests should supersede race, gender, and nationality.
Okay, interesting. So I'll take this as a two-parter. You get to those two-parter questions.
Yeah, I asked really complex stuff, man, and I'm sorry, brother. Thank you.
No, it's good. No, I'm serious. It's fun. It makes me use my brain. You know what I mean? Like, that's Wonderful. How Lenin talks. Lenin always has that, like, multiple connected thoughts in one, so that this one sentence is like, this is the one that you can quote every single line. Right. Whole thought. So, yeah, talking about Southern communists and the different perspective that we might have. Truth is, I grew up in a place that was openly hostile to communism. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I grew up in a place where communist was literally like a dirty word that you use. I mean, yeah, everything was a dirty word. Everything good in the world was a dirty word. Growing up, but I got ostracized as a a young person simply for being an atheist, right? So
Oh,
it
wow.
was
Yeah.
in my little hometown. There was me, the town piano player, who was an open atheist, but because he was the only person who could play organ well enough, they still let him play at the church. Uh, and then,
Yeah.
and then a German exchange student who had no idea what she was getting into by coming to the middle of fucking Georgia, and she got asked on like her first month in town, like, oh, do you believe in God? And she's like, no, of course not. And from then on, she was just ostracized. so, so us three weirdos, right? So many people who are from the South have these kind of experiences of being being queer and being ostracized, being an atheist and being ostracized, just being slightly different from the norm. And so there's this fear that gets built up in a lot of people of coming out, right? But also there's this bravery that has to form, right? Because you know from an early age that like people aren't going to see this as a phase. People aren't going to see this as a just some teenage thing that you're doing to be edgy, right? They're going to see you as a fucking enemy, right?
Yeah.
And so whenever you're real about it as a Southern communist, which I recently started an organization for me and a few people. It's not just me, but we started an organization for helping to support rural communists. Right, it's just called the Communists, and the website is thecommunistorg.com. And the whole idea is people need to start their own little cadres. You're not going to get support from the big organizations out in the middle of the sticks. So the kind of activities that you have to do as a lonely commie, or as a group that's kind of smaller in the middle of a hostile territory, are just different from the activities that you have to do as as somebody living in the middle of a big city. So yeah, we have a different perspective, and also there's a history of communists in the South doing big shit, and read Hammer and Hoe. Any of the history of the Alabama communists, and it gets you. You know what I mean? Hell yeah, these
Woo!
people are good. So yeah, there's something there. So I appreciate what the South did for me, even though it was I had a lot of unlearning to do growing up. I had a lot of I had a lot of socialization that all white people do. I mean, there ain't no white person on the face of the earth, but particularly who grew up in America, who doesn't have some socialized racism that they have to work through.
Yep.
It's just a little bit open in the South, right? It's covert in the North and it's overt in the South. So
yeah.
Anyway, but I appreciate some of the hard lessons that I learned growing up, because it made it to where I knew what the stakes are. You know what I mean? I saw the poverty. I saw people, the meth epidemic, and then the heroin epidemic, like the opiate epidemic, has hit my hometown in many ways. I had a lot, I've had friends die from overdoses, and it's something that like I'm sure some city folk, some middle class suburb folk deal with, but it's just different when you grow up and I was poor. I only ever wore hand me down clothes, and always had like hot dogs and mac and cheese type dinners.
Yeah.
Wasn't allowed to eat out or ever buy new clothes growing up, and that's a lot. All I know is that even as poor as I was, there was still non-white folks who had it worse, right? So we can see these very stark images of everywhere in the United States there's a labor aristocracy. So where there are poor white folks, there are even poorer black folks every single time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just makes things clear. You don't have the bullshit liberal jargon put into your head of like we're all equals and everything's fine, because you see the separation, and I don't know, the racism is in your face rather than hidden behind a big veil of lies. But talking about your second point, which I think is a very interesting one about class reductionism, I think this is something that we have to face. And we have to be very specific about. There is a kind of communist that has come up, like I would call him a quote unquote communist, who's come up who says, let's not worry about this race stuff. Let's not worry about critical race theory or ID Paul. They have all these like derogatory terms for all this stuff, right? They say ID Paul like it's a bad word, right?
Right.
And And the thing is, they want us all to rally around class and say that class is the only thing, and that, we don't need to, because the history of, or the, what is it, like you said, the history of the world is class struggle, right? That we only need to focus on class. But reading even the most basic books on dialectical materialism, like the one that Stalin wrote, even if you don't like Stalin, and a lot of people don't like Stalin for a reason, right? But his book on dialectical and historical materialism is literally it is the dirt simplest book ever written on the subject, right?
Yeah.
Stalin may have been like kind of dumb in some ways, because the way that he writes is very simple. I mean, he's in many ways, like, I feel like when I read Stalin, it's like if I was writing a book, like, you know what I mean? It's extremely simple. So, what he talks about is that the organization of production is part of the means of production, right? So when you talk about the means of production, you're not just talking about factories standing empty. You're not just talking about tools, right? That it requires people. And
Right.
the way that people are organized to do the work is racist. When the white men are put forward for management, are put forward for the professional jobs, the non-white folks are required to do things like janitorial work, menial labor. The women are required to do things like secretarial work and are never allowed to lead, right? Until recent decades, we had an extremely stratified workplace, right? And things are still, like, even though things are not like legally coded to be so stratified anymore, they still are in many ways, right? So fundamentally, the organization of production is racist and sexist. And so when we look at these things, we have to say that it's not the superstructure, it's not culture that is racist alone. It's all the way down in the base. It's in the way that our economy is organized. It's in the way that we interact on a daily basis, both in just talking to each other, but also in the workplace, right? In the way that we make money, in the means of production. It is racially stratified and sexist. And so, we can also talk about all other marginalized groups also suffering from that core of white supremacy. So we can say that class reductionism, ignoring all these other things, is also a wrong standpoint, simply because these other things are baked into the class struggle. The means of production are kind of tilted towards white men. It's tilted towards favoring us, right? So as a white man myself, the minute I can recognize that I am both suffering and the beneficiary, then I can really start to make some changes. But when I'm stuck in this place of constantly denying my comrades who are telling me that they have it worse, who are trying to tell me, like, look, this situation is fucked up, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm constantly in this place of saying, listen, we all got it bad. We're all in one class. We're all in one big family, right? If I'm doing that, right, I look like the same paternalistic asshole who is a non-communist, right? I look like the same kind of person who's saying, sit down, you pretty little woman, listen to me. I'm a big, strong man, right? So that is a fundamentally wrong take. I believe that we need to listen to our non-white comrades more than we listen to the white folks. We need to listen to the non-male comrades more than we listen to the men, right? So I teach, I have my little thing, I organize with a couple of different groups, but I don't lead. And that's important. I think that for me, my teaching, what I do on Twitch, is from one person to another. There is no, like, I'm Mr. Professor doing my thing and everybody's sitting at my feet learning like I'm Socrates, right? It's a very relaxed atmosphere. People can talk, people move. People can press certain keys and I'll dance. You know what I mean? Like, it's good shit.
Corrupting the youth, brother. Yeah.
Yeah. But similarly, in my organizing, I'm not the leader of my group. You know what I mean? I'm just one member of my group, and different people take point on different issues. And with some of the stuff that I do, as far as like my online organizing with different websites too, right? I don't lead it, and maybe sometimes that means there's a little bit of inefficiency. Maybe sometimes it could be better if one person, if one of the people who really want to lead, who is usually a white man, takes that initiative and runs with it. But I don't think so. I think the Zapatista motto para todos, todos, para nosotros, nada. You know what I mean? The idea of like for everybody, everything, for us, nothing is exactly the kind of attitude that people who want to help have to take. Right? I'm gonna do my best to empower other folks. I'm not gonna try to take the glory and the messaging for myself. Right? So I've made mistakes in the past. You know, I got booted kind of from an org for some things that some of it was my fault, some of it was not my fault. But what I learned from it is that in a lot of ways we should share leadership. Having one white guy at the helm of even a small group and having them constantly at the helm, not having a shared leadership, and especially not having a non-white person to help out with conflict is always going to lead to problems because non-white people simply have a different way of talking about things and understanding the world, right? So I'm not saying that white people can't ever hold any kind of leadership whatsoever. I'm not even saying that I necessarily did terrible things in the past, right? But I am saying that like with conflict resolution and with organization and leadership, there is a lot of value in non-white voices, and organizations should be structured such that that everybody is listened to, and the people who are used to not being heard are the ones who are pushed to the front.
Man, I think that's a wonderful answer. And I just want to say that, when you said that, for everyone, everything, and for us, nothing, sort of, and that's the kind of leadership that we need. Uh, Being a musician, it's reminded me of something a producer said. And I don't know, George Massenberg, who the guy said something like, a lot of work can be done when nobody is interested in receiving credit.
Hell yeah.
And so I think about that, and then I go back to at earlier points in our conversation when we talked about Bob Avakian with like people just sort of doting on him of like, oh, he is the greatest political thinker of our time. I'm like, get the fuck out of here, man. That is a red flag because our job is to side with the powerless, and why would we side with the powerless only to get power? The whole Michael Parenti thing. It's like those that would sort of possibly betray the revolution to side with the powerless in order to achieve power. Those are opportunists. Those are people that we should, get out of our circle and recognize and call it out. Because again, what we do is co-optable. Everything is co-optable. But when there is a particular type of hope and discouragement and disheartening that happens when revolutionary movements fall short to sort of individualist corruption. It's very equivalent. It's very similar to something that I think his name is Vijay Prashad said about his book Washington Bullets, and that when the United States assassinates someone that's a democratically elected leader in a foreign country, that shot that shoots that person in the head or what have you, that actually stifles movements for decades because it takes the decades of bringing forth this proletarian determination, but also like rising up out of fear of the power of confronting the tyrannical or oppressive or what have you, these forces which have domain in their lives. So I think of when proletarian movements or when liberation movements or workers movements or what have you, when they are co-opted, when they fall short of their goals because of individualistic corruption, or when it is assassinated, it all has a disheartening, discouraging, stifling impression that it leaves on everyone moving forward. So again, I think we just need to call that shit out. I guess kind of as the last thing, man, I will say, and this is kind of a more personal note, is that as I've, learned about decolonization and read into the into the Black radical tradition, and as I've seen how there are different, like there's a few different books off of, like, I forget the original title of Fanon's work, like Black Faces, White Masks or something like that, right? Well, there's other ones. Yeah, there's other ones like Wretched of the Earth too. But that the title, and I forgive me listeners if I can't remember the title itself. I feel bad about it. But there are other ones that have been made, like Brown Skin, White Mask or whatever, about, I think a Filipino person wrote a book that was inspired off of stuff like that, right? So so when I've learned more about this, I've encountered a personal internal contradiction in that I am from Texas. I wear boots. I love country music. I play mandolin and fiddle, or not fiddle, but dobro and shit. And I love some bluegrass shit. I love some gospel hymns. I love all that stuff, right? Which is which we're told is rooted in whiteness, Appalachia. We're told it, but obviously, like people don't know that like the banjo was actually an African instrument that came in by way of Cuba, and that a lot of these, obviously, the blues and rock and roll, rhythm and blues, was taken from Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and there's an actual song, and I think the band that wrote the song is called Nickel and Rose or something to that end. I might be getting it wrong, but the song's called Americana, and he's talking about how they stole this from you, and someone put on a pair of blue velvet shoes, and I guess that's why they call it Americana, because there's ain't nothing left for me, or ain't no room for me, or this was taken from me. It's a really powerful song, man.
Yeah.
But I felt depressed about a lot of that shit, man, for a little bit, because I was like, who am I, man? Like, I'm biracial, I'm half Mexican, and I love norteño country music, Tejano shit, because that's what I grew up on. But it comes back to like this sort of settler colonial genocidal form of whiteness that like leads you to be the type of person that never questions why the swarthy hordes are surrounding the white people that are seemingly innocent in the covered wagon. Why are the Indians attacking the white people? Nobody asks, like, maybe they stole their land. Maybe they murdered their family members. Maybe if the white people found them, they would be shot on sight. So so out of that sort of contemplation around that central contradiction, I feel like it has been empowering for me to re-embrace all of that in a more clear-sighted way of like, yeah, I make country music, but you know what? I'm not going to make that kind of country music. And I'm going to take back the music that I make and the genre specifics of it in a way that that does not recreate the problematic elements that are frankly a trope about country music and things now. And and in talking to you here, man, I'm like, I wonder if you have encountered anything similarly. Because I mean, for listeners, I mean, you're wearing a cowboy hat right now. You go by Gomer online, right? But I think that you are single-handedly, in a lot of ways, at least to sort of young communists, sort of taking back, reterritorializing those aesthetics. And from a person who has encountered those conflicts myself, I really appreciate you and what you do because of that specific aspect. And I don't know if others have told you that or what. So you take that anywhere you want, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, there's something to be said about that. My reading group, actually, it's very topical that you mentioned this, because for me personally, because my reading group is going over this part of Wretched of the Earth, where they talk about the reconstruction of culture and how the colonized people have to put things back together for themselves, and like, is it really a part of the old culture, or is it bringing it back? Is it just taking on the customs and the traditions, but not having anything to do with the actual culture that was taken from them? Right. Fanon's bringing up a lot of these really interesting ideas, and it just got me thinking about my own self. Because I grew up in I grew up in a place where, yeah, folk music and country music was really important to my family and to me. I grew up in a family of musicians, and the old hymns and such. I still like the old hymns, even though I'm an atheist. But
right. Which I haven't even talked to you about that, but I'm an atheist as well, and I could probably talk to you forever about that sort of thing too. So
yeah, for sure. But what I've found just for myself is that, just like they say that the colonizer strips the colonized people of their humanity, but also strips themselves of their humanity. The colonizer strips away the colonized people's culture, but also loses their own in the process. So much of whiteness is the destruction of every individual white colonized culture that came before it, that was brought into whiteness, being erased as well. The Irish and German, and I mean, we're made into a mockery. Like on St. Patrick's Day, it's a day that used to be an important religious holiday in many ways, and now it's just a celebration of getting drunk. You know what I mean? And
right.
which is not a terrible thing, but at the same time, it's like there are no like quote unquote serious cultural heritage type holidays, right? Everything is commercialized, everything is brought into the now alone. There is no hearkening back to our quote unquote white roots, because there are none, right? The cultures are destroyed in being brought into whiteness. So what I say is some of the things that you and I are talking about here, as far as country music and some of the aesthetics, we are putting together our own culture as well in many ways now. We are saying like, yeah, this is part of my childhood, part of my past, and these customs that we're talking about have a good side and a bad side, and we're going to take the good and leave the bad, and we're going to bring back the parts of the culture that mean something. Like I talk about this on a regular basis, how when I was growing up, being an outlaw, hating the pigs and running moonshine and shit, was like, that was what we talked about our grandparents doing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I had grandparents who were actual like moonshiners. I had one of my grandparents drove the first beer wagon into Oklahoma. You know what I mean? So I'm related to Jesse James, So that's the shit that we talked about, that we said like, that's real. That's important. You know what I mean? And and as I got older, this whole bootlicking aesthetic started getting brought more and more into it, until it totally took it all over, right? And it was always there. Don't get me wrong. There was always a certain amount of bootlicking going on in country music, but now the outlaw culture is completely gone. It is only the bootlicking culture in many ways. Like, it's party culture and bootlicking culture. It's devoid of anything meaningful. So yeah, I would say that we can look at the things from the past that are, and we don't have to make excuses for all of whiteness. We can say all that stuff is shitty, right? And so many of the symbols we have to leave behind. But when we talk about cowboys, a lot of cowboys were people of color. A lot of cowboys were trans men who were trying to live their life as they could, away from the cities where they were not allowed to be themselves, right? And that's historical. That's not just us making that shit up. Like, there's accounts of actual trans people going to live as cowboys, right? So so those are the kind of things we can uphold. We can say, look, we have these traditions of mixing and not only appropriation, right? We have these traditions of people working together. We have the miners who came together, black and white, to try to fight against the mining companies. And we have unions, and we have the Communist Party that for a time was trying to do its own little decolonial project in the United States before it kind of got co-opted by the racists, right? So yeah, I think that we're forging our own culture now. We can't harken back to ancient roots, and we can't talk about a global white culture, but we can say, hey, this is at least me, and I don't have to be lost on the shores. And part of the reason why I'm lost on the shores of my own cultural identity is because of the thing that I have sworn my life to destroy, right? So whenever we actually destroy capitalism, when we destroy the white supremacy, we can start exploring who we are as a people.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think I had this thought at some point, because you bring up the question of like who we are. And I think there's always been a fundamental sort of contradiction between Marxism and the collective, and maybe existentialism and individuality. And the way that I sort of thought was that these two projects are reconcilable if we are fighting to give everyone a fair shot at existentialism. Like, if we are fighting to give men and women around the world a fair shot at answering the question, who am I? Or how might we live? Or how should one act? Or, if we can reconcile the sort of Sartrean, the sort of creation of your own meaning within this life, and if we can give everyone equal access to the creation of their own being, I mean, that's liberation. I would think. So, Well, Gomer, listen, man, I loved our conversation. I thought it was really cool. I hope you'll be a friend of the show and come back at some point, and we'll talk about things that we'll dive further in than a surface level skimming. But do you have any final words for any leftists or any baby leftists that are just coming into radicalization, and where can we find you online?
Absolutely. If you're a baby leftist just getting started, don't get turned off by all the bullshit. Trust your gut, and do a little bit of engagement with theory, even if it ain't reading. Maybe it's listening to audiobooks. Maybe it's having a little book club. Maybe it's watching YouTube videos or coming to my stream. Right, whatever it happens to be, there are ways to engage with it if you have trouble reading it. Where you can find me online is twitch.tv/Comrade Gomer. I'm currently on Twitter. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at allcommie, ALLCOMMIE, but Twitter hates me. I try very hard to not get into fights. I don't call people names. I don't tell anybody I'm going to hurt them, right? And still I get banned all the time. So, it can be a bit of a shit show watching my account get taken down. But yeah, it's one of the things where it's like, well, if I really believe that communism is a threat to capital, and Twitter and some of these other social media companies are the propaganda arm of capital, then it really should not surprise me. But yeah, some other websites that you should check out are radicalreparations.com. That's one where I talk about just the necessity of arming the Black proletariat and how us white folks have a moral obligation to do so. And then thecommunistorg.com is where we do help for forming new cadres. If you are not comfortable joining a full-on organization, if you feel like there's no organization in your area that's going to support you or help you out in a way that you understand the local area needs help, then I recommend starting your own little cadre. Get 3 friends together and start your own little communist club. And that is in a tradition that is 100 years old. That is how revolutions happen. Revolutions don't happen in the big cities by themselves, just with a comfortable communists meeting in small rooms and talking. It happens in the countryside where shit is dangerous, right? So yeah, we try to support y'all however we can. Sometimes it's just moral support. Sometimes it's telling you how to set things up, how to do your vetting, how to do your praxis, get out the mutual aid, how to set up your website and such if you wanted to do something like that. So we try to make it easy for new cadres to form out in the countryside.
Das Vidanya, Tovarish. I'm Comrade Gomer. Welcome to my channel. Here on my channel, we will talk about theory, specifically communist theory. And we will also be giving tips for new revolutionaries and making fun of libs. So welcome y'all to my channel. I try to break it down real easy for people to understand anything that I'm saying and anything that the guys from the past said as well. So come on down and hang out with me and we'll bullshit about communism. Thank you.
If I wasn't standing on this stage, would you wonder why I was here? Would you ask me if I was lost or if I came to sell you pills? Well, I thought this was for everyone, not just a few. But I guess you won't be satisfied till it all belongs to you, Americana. I guess that's why it's called Americana. Sister Rosetta made this land for me and you, stolen by a man from Tennessee with blue suede shoes. Made it look so easy, and you all called him the king. But what about the folks who wrote those songs he loved to sing? Americana. There ain't no room for me, Americana. There ain't no room for me, Americana. I don't wanna be an Americana. 'Cause oh, so many years ago I used to have a home, but then somewhere along the way lost everything I own. The instruments from Africa are no longer for me. Just like the songs we sang when we all wanted to be free, Americana. There ain't no room for me in Americana. There ain't no room for me in Americana. And I don't wanna be in Americana. Somewhere along the way, lost everything I own. And these things just don't happen. And I just can't believe somebody else's version of my own history, Americana. I guess that's why it's called